Have you ever been burned?
Oh yeah,
Yeah?
absolutely.
Do you remember the first time? As a parent, I'm petrified. It's the first thing, it's part of the getting ready for school ritual, putting sun cream on. She loves to play outside, loves take off all her clothes actually, which is an added, she burns naturally hot, so that's an added challenge. But yeah, it's that first time certainly looms large on the horizon. I think it's probably inevitable at some stage that she will catch too much sun. Do you remember the first time, and do you remember what that was like, or your parents' reaction to that? Was that?
I don't.
You don't?
I don't remember the first time. There was a first time for sure.
And many subsequent times, or?
Many, I wouldn't say so. Several for sure. But I don't remember the last time I got burnt.
You don't remember the last time?
No.
Well, that's good.
And that's an interesting point.
Yeah.
That means that it's a long time ago.
Yeah.
Probably leads back to my childhood, teenagehood, but not adulthood. Which is sad actually, because if you get sunburnt during childhood, the consequences in the long run are way worse than if you get burnt in adulthood.
Okay. Why is that?
Well, as far as I know, the skin of a child is more sensitive, it's thinner. And the second thing is that the consequences, the bad consequences, the very bad consequences, I'm talking about skin cancer basically, of overexposure to the sun don't come immediately after you get sunburned. It comes normally 20 years later. Which means that if I get burned today, I'm 42. The potential long-term consequences will come in my 60s. And my life expectancy is probably similar to yours, let's say 80 years old. So I have to deal with those consequences for 20 years. Whereas if I get burnt at the age of 5, I might develop something bad at the age of 25, and I'll have to deal with that for many more years. So that's one reason why it's particularly important to protect your skin well during your childhood. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't do the same in adulthood, but the consequences are not exactly the same.
Yeah.
So back to what you were saying, the fact that you're petrified to think about Arabella getting burnt, and don't worry, I mean, it's the same with all parents of children with albinism that I meet today in France. The interesting thing is that I'm pretty sure that people with albinism that grow up in France now will have a much better skin than the general population in the adult ages, because they protect their skin so well. And I'm reaching a point where I see adults with albinism that look much younger than they really are, because they're protecting their skin super well. And so when parents ask me what I recommend, what they should do, at a certain point in the conversation, I end up saying, well, it depends on what your goal is. Is your goal to avoid sunburns? Is your goal to avoid skin cancer? Is your goal to avoid accelerated skin aging? Because depending upon the goal, you might not apply exactly the same photoprotection. You know, some people, and particularly women today, in the general population, apply some form of sunscreen every day on their face, no matter what the weather is, no matter the season of the year. I don't think they need to do that to avoid skin cancer, but to avoid skin aging, it's probably something good to do. So do you want to look like you're 40 years old at the age of 80? Or do you just want to look like you're 80 at the age of 80? It's your decision.
Yeah.
But the challenge with parents, obviously, is that they're making decisions for their child. So they're responsible for what will happen to their child in their adulthood. it's not like making a decision for yourself. So that's why it's probably much more challenging and difficult. And I understand what you're feeling, even though I don't have your experience.
We had a sort of barbecue at the house, and I was running around with her friends. And towards the end of the evening, as I'm getting her ready for bed, a little girl with, pigtails, and there was a parting in her head. And all of a sudden I looked at this parting and I could see this sort of bright pink. And I thought to myself, she wasn't wearing her hat. She'd been running around in the sun and she's burnt the top of her head. And there was that moment sort of hits you like a ton of bricks where, I failed her. I should have insisted that she wore the hat, and I went outside and there happened to be a doctor with us at the barbecue. And I said, look, can you come? This looks painful. And he came over and, with my wife, and we took a closer look, and I wasn't wearing my glasses at the time, but it turned out it was just makeup. But it really hit home that, she'd taken some makeup and she'd put it on her head. But it really hit home that, certainly up to a certain age, it's a situation that I would like to avoid for my own conscience, and
of course.
So yeah, thankfully she wasn't burnt. But you mentioned that there wasn't an association when you were growing up here in France, but I believe your mother, or was it your father, who got involved in Genespoir, which then became
absolutely
the association
right.
for albinism in France.
Right.
Can you tell us a bit about it was your mother or
my mother?
Your mother. How she got involved with that and the sort of pioneering work that I believe she did?
Right. So the French Albinism Association was created in 1995, and we were not involved at all in that in the founding of the association. It's only 3 years later that we just happened to hear about that association and decided to join it. This being said, since I was born, I've known my parents as people who'd, in a very natural manner, get involved in associations, in volunteering, in non-profits. That was something just part of their DNA, I would say. So it's not surprising that soon after we joined the association, they started volunteering, they started being active. And because they already had that skill, the skill set basically to be effective, active members of the association. Soon later, my mother became actually the president of the association, and she did that for 22 years. So it became really a big component of our family life. You ask if it was my mother or my father. Well, officially it was my mother. But my father had to deal with that every day because, even though my mom had a full-time job, that role of president of Genespoir,
she was the president.
Yes.
Yeah.
Came along with a very big workload, and she was, in a way, responsible for part of that workload because she was ambitious. She wanted to do a good job. She wanted to serve the community as well as possible. So, when you're the president, you decide what activities you want to implement, what goals you want to set to the association, and yeah. So she's for a part responsible for that situation, but still, she had big difficulties towards the end to find other people to take over on that position, and thankfully she managed to find a way out, but it was becoming quite problematic with my father, who very normally requested some family time.
Yeah.
So I just followed her work at first from afar, but I was interested.
So was it important to you as a son that she was engaged? I know that one of the questions that I've asked myself is, for when Arabella's old enough and she asks me, essentially, what have you done? It was important that I, have a good answer for her. A reason, that I reached out to you, a reason for this podcast. I think any good parent would like to be as involved as possible to help, to assist. in whatever way they can. But was that important to you then?
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say it was important to me. It was, I would find it interesting, but I wouldn't say that I expected my parents to do something to be active in that association. And I think that it's important to say that nobody's obligated to do that. Neither parents of children with albinism nor people with albinism themselves. As we said at the beginning, albinism is only part of our identity. And if a person with albinism lives a happy, fulfilling life without volunteering for the albinism community, without giving particular attention to albinism, it's more than okay. It's more than okay. What we want is for people with albinism to thrive and to be happy and to have a fulfilling life. That's all. If some want to be active and serve the community and volunteer to help make progress and improve the quality of life of the community, that's great. Of course, we need these people, but it's not an obligation.
Yeah.
So, and again, that's not what I expected from my parents. I would just follow what they were doing. And at a certain point in time, after I finished university and I found a job and I felt like I had the possibility to also be active myself, and I was interested. So that was back in 2010. In 2010, I became a board member of Jeune Espoir, of the French Albinism Association, to not just follow from afar the work that was being done, but actually contribute to that work. Back at that time, I was just back from Moscow. I had a 2-year work experience in Russia. I was back in France, and I became active in the association. But I really wanted to make a difference, to really contribute to the work of the association. So we started discussing with my mother what I could do. And we soon realized that with my experience of interacting, being active in an international context, I had actually already several life experiences abroad. Back at that time, I spoke several foreign languages, but also with my scientific background, I could contribute to in different ways to the activities of the association. In a very concrete way, I was in charge of developing and managing the international relationships of the association, and at the same time, I was in charge of the managing the relationships of the association with the medical and research world. Regarding the international relationships of the association, back then there was nothing. In Europe, the associations of people with albinism that existed did not know each other and did not run any joint activities. So my job was to get in touch with each of them and explore with them what we could do together. And so I did that for several years, traveled around Europe to meet people in person. Back at that time, I learned how important it is to meet people in person. And what I also remember from those first years was how much that experience that was directly tied to albinism also opened my eyes on the challenges that European countries have been facing in building and structuring the European Union. Because basically I was developing some form of European Union of albinism.
Okay.
And so every time I was going to a new country with the goal to convince the association of that country to join us and in that European collaboration, I'd have to develop a new strategy because the culture was different. Mm-hmm. So you cannot deliver the same speech to convince the Italian association and to convince the Danish association. It will not work. So every time my goal was the same, but I had to adapt, to get to know the people, their culture, their specificities to get to my goal, to convince them. That was a pretty interesting experience.
And how did this now develop into your current work with the GAA? How did that come about?
I worked in developing the European relationships for 6 to 8 years until about 2018. And then as I was stepping down from that role, I was right away, I would say, hired to work on developing the Global Albinism Alliance. So it was just basically going one step further.
Right.
Instead of interacting with people in Europe, my job became to interact with people all around the world.
So still within the sort of Jeune Espoir umbrella, it was a quote, no?
No. It was, I mean, officially, my only official role in the albinism community was tied to Jeune Espoir.
Okay.
But launching the Global Albinism Alliance was more a personal decision than a decision from Jeune Espoir.
So you're a co-founder.
Absolutely.
So who was involved and how did that idea come to be?
So for you to really understand how that happened, you need to understand the history of the albinism movement, I would say. The first albinism organizations that were created were launched in the late 1970s. The first albinism association that we know of is the Tanzania Albinism Society. It was created in 1977. A year later was funded the Albinism Fellowship in the UK and Ireland. Then in 1983, NOAA, the National Albinism Organization in the US, was created. And then more and more albinism associations were created over time. The first attempt to form some sort of alliance at the global level was made, I believe, around 1992. It was called the Albinism World Alliance. Unfortunately, that initiative did not reach sustainability, and it just disappeared a few years later. Then there was a second attempt in around 2011, 2012. I was part of it. I was not the driving force, but I was a part of that group. It was called the World Albinism Alliance. We had to come up with a different name. And it was initiated by people from the Albinism Fellowship of Australia. Again, unfortunately, that initiative was not successful. So the first successful representation of the albinism movement is, in fact, happened in 2015, when the United Nations created a mandate on albinism and nominated an expert to hold that mandate. So it's not per se the voice of the albinism community, but it's still a global representation of the albinism community. The first expert who was nominated is Miss Ike Ero, Ikponwoza Ero. I got to meet her a few years later after she was nominated, around 2017, 2018. And that's when the idea of a new attempt of forming a global alliance for albinism was first discussed. I discussed it with her together with another prominent leader of the albinism community, Mike McGowan, who back then was the executive director of NOAA. All three of us gathered and started a discussion around a new attempt. why? It was clearly a request coming from IK Aero, who was really facing huge challenging in her role of independent expert at the UN because of not having a global alliance to talk to rely on. So she had to do her job of UN expert and at the same time to sort of compensate for the lack of global representation of the albinism community. So it was a clear request from her. We discussed it, took some time to really frame the project, and eventually in January of 2020 we organized in Paris, in France, a meeting to explore with other leaders of the albinism community the idea of forming a global alliance for albinism. We had 27 delegates around the table coming from all regions of the world and representing the diversity of associations and NGOs that are serving the albinism community. Basically what we wanted was to avoid making a decision in a room, just the three of us. We needed that legitimacy. We needed to make sure that the albinism community supported that idea. And it was decided unanimously to form the Global Albinism Alliance. I don't know if you noticed, I mentioned in January of 2020. Sometimes in life, you need to be lucky. January of 2020 was right before the pandemic started. Right. And we had people in room from all regions of the world, included from Asia, from Japan, from China. You remember that where COVID supposedly started, it wasn't a problem. We had the meeting, everything went well. And 2 or 3 weeks later, we discovered that holding a similar meeting would have been impossible just a few weeks later. So we were very lucky.
And why Paris? Why is France playing this role?
I would say there were probably two main reasons. First, because among the three co-organizers, one, myself, was based in Paris. And the second reason is because since we wanted to gather people from all regions of the world, we had to be smart and pick a place that was easy to reach by plane for a majority of people. Okay. And it appears that France is quite well located. When you want to travel to North or South America, to Asia, to Africa, that's the main reason. But we had people who travel a long way to come to Paris. We had people from Chile, we had people from Fiji, Australia, Japan. Still not ideal for them, but that's why we picked Paris.
Okay. And then, so you agreed that yes, it was needed, and that you were now going to proceed with officially registering the association.
Not exactly.
Okay.
We agreed to move forward and implement the project, but we also decided, we also realized that we needed time to frame better the project and to consult further the community on their expectations, because we had only 27 delegates in the room. The albinism community is huge. So we decided to start with a pilot phase, meaning that we did not register the organization right away. We nominated a small team to run a pilot phase that was in charge of running a longer consultation and starting operating to gain experience. Looking back, I can say for sure that no one in the room had the experience of developing and running that sort of organization. We all had the experience of running an NGO or a national albinism association, but it's really not the same to run a global alliance for associations and NGOs. So we needed that time to learn and to really understand who we were, what we were meant to do, who we were meant to be, and how to do it. So initially we wanted to run the pilot phase for just a year. It took more 2 to 3 years. We officially registered the alliance in October of 2021, so just 4 years ago. And so I was part of the pilot team, and once the alliance was registered, I became the first executive director. So for me, it was a huge change in my life, because I went from volunteering for the albinism community and volunteering to such an extent that all my free time, weekends, vacation, evenings would go into albinism, to doing this as a paid job, a completely different setting. I resigned from my previous job. I did not mention, but I'm a civil engineer by training, so I stopped that and went on working full time for albinism.
So